Have you ever tried so many times that you stopped believing the next one would be any different? Maybe at the beginning you had hope. Real hope. The kind that makes you sit up straighter, breathe deeper, and say to yourself, "This time will work." Maybe you told yourself all you needed was more patience, more discipline, more effort. So you gave more. You stayed up later. You woke up earlier. You pushed when your mind was tired. You kept going when your heart was already beginning to doubt you. And still, nothing changed. Or maybe something did change. Just not the thing you wanted. Maybe your effort stayed the same, but your belief got weaker. Maybe after enough disappointments, you stopped feeling excited before an attempt. You started feeling afraid of it. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, almost invisibly. You began preparing yourself for disappointment before anything had even happened. And that's when it gets dangerous. Not when you fail. Not even when you fail again. But when failure starts feeling familiar. This is the story of someone who lived inside that loop for a long time. Someone who kept showing up. Someone who refused to quit. Someone who did everything he believed he was supposed to do, and still watched his life stand still. His name was Daniel. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. He wasn't the kind of person who wanted everything handed to him. He believed in effort. He believed in discipline. He believed that if you kept going long enough, something would eventually move. And for a while, that belief carried him. It made the long nights feel meaningful. It made the routines feel noble. It made the waiting feel temporary. Until temporary started becoming his whole life. Every morning looked almost the same. The same apartment, the same desk, the same laptop opening with that small sound he knew too well. The same cup of coffee cooling beside him while he stared at a screen, trying to convince himself that today would somehow be different. From the outside, Daniel didn't look like someone falling apart. That's the strange thing about people who are quietly struggling. They often look functional, organized, responsible, normal. But inside, he was carrying something heavy. Not just stress, not just frustration. Shame. The kind of shame that grows when your life doesn't match the effort you're putting into it. The kind that makes you avoid simple questions. Any updates? How's the job search going? Have you heard back yet? Harmless questions from other people. But inside him, they landed like pressure. He had a degree. He had decent experience. He had enough self-awareness to know he wasn't entitled to anything. But he also couldn't understand why every attempt seemed to disappear into nothing. He wasn't just being rejected by companies. He was being rejected by uncertainty, by silence, by the absence of explanation. And when life keeps giving you outcomes without explanations, you eventually start blaming yourself in ways that aren't fair. At first, Daniel treated the process like a numbers game. Apply more. Move faster. Stay active. Keep momentum. One application turned into 5. 5 turned into 12. 12 turned into weeks of repetition. He updated his resume, adjusted a few phrases, changed some formatting, reused the same cover letter with different company names. And every time he clicked send, he felt a brief, fragile kind of relief. Not confidence, not excitement, just relief. As if effort itself had become a way to escape the discomfort of standing still. But nothing meaningful was changing. The inbox stayed quiet. The replies were rare. And when they came, they often sounded empty. Polite words, generic language, no insight, no clarity. Just another closed door. Still, he kept going. Because what else was he supposed to do? Stopping felt like failure. Rest felt like laziness. Slowing down felt dangerous. So he stayed busy. And sometimes, busyness can look a lot like progress when you're too exhausted to tell the difference. Every day, he performed the ritual. Search. Scroll. Apply. Refresh. Wait. Doubt. Repeat. He watched videos about being more productive, read articles about standing out, listened to advice from people who sounded sure of themselves. And still, his world kept giving him the same answer. Nothing. The dangerous part wasn't the rejection. It was what the repetition was doing to his identity. Daniel started to change the way he saw himself. Not all at once, but line by line, thought by thought. He would look at friends getting offers, promotions, new apartments, new routines, and feel something he hated admitting. He felt left behind. Not because he wanted their life, but because their movement made his stillness more visible. Social media became harder to look at. Conversations became harder to enjoy. Even rest became difficult, because resting without results doesn't feel restful. It feels earned by nothing. He started waking up with heaviness in his chest, started checking his phone before his eyes fully adjusted to the light, started measuring entire days by whether a stranger had replied to him or not. And that's when effort becomes dangerous. When your sense of worth starts depending on outcomes you don't control. He wasn't only looking for a job anymore. He was looking for proof. Proof that he mattered. Proof that he was good enough. Proof that all of this effort meant something. Then, one day, something subtle happened. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. No life-changing phone call. No mentor appearing at the perfect time. No speech. Just another rejection email. Same polite tone. Same distant language. Same invisible wall between his effort and their decision. But this time, he didn't feel angry. He didn't feel sad. He felt empty. And somehow, that emptiness frightened him more than failure ever had. Because anger still means you care. Frustration still means you expect something. Emptiness means something inside you is beginning to shut down. So instead of opening another tab the way he always did, he just sat there, hands still, screen glowing, coffee gone cold beside him. And for the first time in months, he stopped trying to outrun the truth. What if the problem isn't how much I'm trying? That thought followed him into the next morning. And the next. He began looking at his old applications, not like someone hoping to be chosen, but like someone trying to understand a pattern. And that's when the image came to him. Simple. Almost embarrassingly simple. He had been trying to open 100 different doors with the exact same key. Different companies, different roles, different expectations, different needs. But the same resume, the same tone, the same generic language, the same assumption that repetition was the same thing as progress. That was the moment the truth finally landed. Repeating effort is not the same as improving effort. You can work hard in the wrong pattern for a very long time. And if you never stop long enough to see the pattern, you'll call it bad luck. You'll call it failure. You'll call it proof that you're not enough. But sometimes, it's just misalignment. The next day, Daniel did something almost laughably small. He stopped aiming for volume. No 10 applications. No frantic scrolling. No trying to feel productive by moving faster. He chose one job. Just one. Then he sat with it. Really sat with it. He read the description slowly. Not to check boxes, not to skim keywords, but to understand what they were actually asking for. What are they trying to solve? What kind of person would make their life easier? What signals are they really looking for? For the first time, he stopped writing what sounded impressive and started writing what was relevant. He rewrote the resume from scratch. Not the whole life story, just the parts that mattered most to this one door. It was slower, much slower. And because of that, it felt wrong. It felt unproductive. It felt like he was doing less. But for the first time, less wasn't less. Less was focused. The old voice came back almost immediately. This won't matter. You're wasting time. You should be doing more. You're falling behind while you sit here being careful. And that's what people rarely talk about. When you try to change a pattern, the pattern fights back. Not because you're weak, but because the familiar always feels safer than the unknown, even when the familiar is quietly destroying you. So Daniel made a deal with himself. Not a dramatic promise, not a life-changing vow. Just 1 week. 1 week of doing it differently. 1 week of trading speed for attention. 1 week of choosing awareness over panic. He kept notes. He tracked what he changed. He studied job descriptions more carefully. He paid attention to patterns in language. He looked at his own work honestly, not cruelly. That distinction mattered. Honestly, not cruelly. Because self-awareness without compassion becomes self-attack. And self-attack teaches you nothing useful. At first, nothing happened. No breakthrough, no sudden flood of responses, no cinematic payoff. Just more waiting. But this time, waiting felt different because the effort underneath it was different. It was no longer blind, no longer desperate, no longer just motion for the sake of feeling less helpless. Then, one morning, a reply came. Not an offer, not even an interview. Just a human response. A real one. It referenced something specific from his application. A line he had tailored. An experience he had framed differently. A detail that showed someone had actually read what he wrote. For a long moment, Daniel just stared at the screen. Because after so much silence, being seen felt almost unreal. It was a small signal. But small signals matter when you've been lost. A tiny shift in direction can mean everything.
So he kept going. Same approach, same care, same restraint. One role at a time. One thoughtful attempt at a time. Then another reply came. Then another. Not all positive. Not all successful. But different. Different was enough. Because now, even rejection was starting to teach him something. Some roles wanted stronger examples. Some wanted clearer language. Some responded better when he highlighted outcomes instead of responsibilities. He wasn't just applying anymore. He was calibrating, observing, adjusting, improving. And the strangest part was this. His confidence didn't return all at once because success suddenly arrived. It returned because confusion started leaving. Clarity is powerful, even before it gives you results.
Somewhere along the way, Daniel realized the job search had never only been about work. It had become a mirror. A mirror reflecting every fear he had about being ordinary, about being overlooked, about trying and still not being enough. That's why the silence hurt so much. It was never just silence. It was silence touching an old wound. Maybe you know that feeling. Maybe in your life it isn't work. Maybe it's your health, your discipline, your healing, your relationships, your attempt to become someone stronger than the version of you that keeps collapsing in private. Whatever it is, the pattern is often the same. You try. You fail. You try harder. You stay in the same structure. And then you call the whole thing hopeless. But hopeless and misaligned are not the same thing. A few weeks later, Daniel got his first interview from this new approach. It wasn't his dream company. It wasn't perfect. But it was movement. He prepared differently, too. Not by memorizing perfect answers. Not by trying to sound impressive. He prepared by understanding. Understanding the role. Understanding his own story. Understanding how to speak clearly about what he could actually do. He was still nervous. Still human. Still afraid it would go nowhere. But nervous and stuck are not the same thing. He did the interview. Then another. Then another. Some went well. Some didn't. Some left him hopeful. Some humbled him. But all of them gave him something he hadn't had before. Direction. Growth is rarely loud when it is real. There was no dramatic montage in Daniel's life. No sudden transformation where he became a new person overnight. No magical morning where he woke up fearless. There were just small, repeated improvements. A better sentence. A clearer example. A sharper understanding. A calmer response.
a stronger sense of where his effort was actually landing. And over time, those small things became momentum. This is what most people miss. They want the breakthrough. They want the visible result. They want the part that proves the struggle was worth it. But breakthroughs are often built from invisible. Then one afternoon, it happened. An email, a subject line that looked ordinary at first, a few words on a screen, and then the sentence that made everything inside him go still. They wanted to make him an offer. Daniel didn't jump. He didn't shout. He didn't turn into the version of success movies like to show you. He exhaled. That was the first thing he did. He exhaled like someone who had been bracing for impact for months and had finally realized the ground beneath him was steady. And in that moment, it wasn't even the job that hit him hardest. It was the understanding. He had not been doomed. He had not been broken. He had not been fundamentally less capable than everyone else. He had been trapped in a pattern. And once he changed the pattern, the outcome began to change too. This story isn't really about Daniel. It's about you. Because somewhere in your life, there is probably a door you keep trying to force open. A goal. A habit. A dream. A healing process. A version of yourself you keep trying to reach. And maybe lately, the repetition has started hurting more than the effort itself. Maybe you're tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Maybe you're discouraged in a way other people can't see. Maybe you've been working so hard that you haven't had the courage to ask the only question that matters. What if this isn't failing because you don't care enough, but because you haven't changed how you're trying? Let this sink in. Trying harder is easy to glorify. It sounds noble. It sounds strong. It sounds like the kind of advice people clap for. But trying differently, that requires humility. That requires self-awareness. That requires admitting that effort alone is not wisdom. Effort without reflection is just repetition. Movement without direction is not progress. Pain does not always mean you are growing. Sometimes it means you are repeating what is wounding you. And being stuck does not always mean you are weak. Sometimes it means you are loyal to a pattern that no longer deserves your loyalty. So what do you do with this? Not tomorrow. Not when you feel more motivated. Now. First, slow down. Not because slowing down feels comfortable, but because speed hides patterns. When you rush, you repeat. When you pause, you notice. Second, study what isn't working without turning it into an attack on yourself. Look honestly. Look clearly. Look like someone who wants to learn, not someone who wants to punish themselves. Third, make one meaningful change. Not 10, not a whole new identity. One change. One different sentence. One different habit. One different structure. Listen carefully. You do not need to hate yourself into growth. You do not need to exhaust yourself into worthiness. You do not need to keep proving your seriousness by suffering in the same circle. Maybe the bravest thing you can do right now is not to push harder. Maybe the bravest thing you can do is to stop long enough to see the truth. To admit that what you've been doing isn't working. To let go of the version of effort that only makes you feel busy. To choose awareness over ego. To choose precision over panic. To choose a different key.
Shh. You do not need to fix your whole life tonight. You do not need a perfect plan. You do not need to become someone else before you deserve a new beginning. Real change rarely announces itself with fireworks. It often arrives quietly, as a question, as an honest pause, as a small decision that breaks an old pattern. That is enough. More than enough. So tonight, don't